Hello, Patreon supporters. That's my attempt at a wave. Today we are going to be going over plastic bag techniques for texturing, in this case, Chavant clay. Although a lot of these techniques will transfer over to wet clay, Sculpey, whatever you're going to throw at it, monster clay. So first of all, I'm just going to go over some tools that you will need. Obviously, we have our clay board here. Things you might need: chip brush. Again, these are just cheap chip brushes that I get from Harbor Freight. Stipple sponge. This one's kind of gunked up. Here's another one. You'll notice here that stipple sponges, they come in different coarsenesses. And you could actually find these a lot as packing materials. And sometimes I'll just save some packing materials and cut it off of that. So this is like a less dense stipple sponge, and this is a more dense or more coarse stipple sponge. I have some pour tools. These again are from Ken's Tools, and you can see that they both have little stipple tools that are going to create pour textures. You can also make these on your own. If you would rather not buy that, you can also use just a ball end tool. They make these for nail art. I got this one. This is from a Sculpey 3-pack kit, which is one of my favorites. But anyway, this is a bigger ball, but you can get all different sizes. Let's see. This is just my W121 or W21 Kemper tool that I use for just about everything. So we're going to go over how to use that. You can get one of these. This is actually for sewing. You can get this at like Joann Fabrics or even Michael's. It's used normally, and this is actually why I had it, because I used to make a lot of costumes. This is used to poke holes in things and create like a texture like that. I don't know if you can see it. So it creates sort of a stitch texture, and it's used to mark your fabric so that you know where you want to sew or cut or whatever. You know, honestly, I didn't really use it that much for sewing, so I can't tell you for sure. I'm going to use a pen torch here. This is my Bernzomatic pen torch, and we can also use a blowtorch for some of these techniques. So this one's a little bit finer and easier to direct. Also, it's very low on fuel right now, so it's very soft. But if you need to torch a large area or melt things fast, this is what you need. So, and then we also would need a lighter. And I usually like to have a little bit of baby powder sometimes for some techniques. And I believe that is pretty much it. Oh, and canned air, sorry. This is just canned air. I think I got it from Target or possibly Harbor Freight, I don't remember. Use this a lot to rapidly cool your clay. Okay, so we're going to be going over, like I said, plastic techniques. So what you will also need is plastic. So I'm just going to go over some quick plastic types. This is heavy-duty Saran wrap. It's thinner than most plastics, but it's still pretty thick. This is regular kitchen Saran wrap, which is thinner than this. So this is stuff that's used for packing. Like if you're packing up a pallet and you need to secure something to it, you wrap this around it. This is a little bit thinner, more delicate. This is a plastic bag that I got from, I don't even remember, from shopping. It's a little bit stiffer than the Saran wrap. I'm sure it's probably made of a different material. I don't know what that is, but this is just a section that I cut off. Here's a Ziploc bag. And usually when I get these, I usually just tear them open. We're not going to use the zipper, so you can even cut that off if you want. There's that. And, I mean, you can find plastic anywhere. A lot of times I'll just use plastic that I have lying around as wrappers or something like that. Like I have some plastic that I got from a thing. You can use that. It just all depends on what's handy and what you need, and you'll kind of get a feel for that. And I will say, for these techniques, a lot of times it really helps to have see-through plastic, because then you can see kind of what you're doing. But your plastic is, as you use it, going to get more and more gunked up. And that's okay. Sometimes this works better for stuff. So to start with, I'm going to put the center. I'm just going to start with some wrinkle techniques. I just laid in some clay here to create some sagging wrinkle texture. And I'll just quick touch that up. Where's my, there it is, W21. Just kind of adding some, you know, wrinkle texture. And I'm doing this directly on the clay. I'm not using my plastic bag for this part. You want that to be fairly smooth. So like I can, you know, use a little bit of solvent. This is just alcohol. Scrub it out a little bit so that it softens up the edges. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get rid of any remaining tool marks. So I think you could maybe see in the beginning, like I have some of my rake marks there. You don't want those. You want to get that mostly smoothed out. So there's my softened texture there. And we've gone over this before in other videos. And now what you're going to do is you're going to take your plastic. And I'll show you some of the different plastics here. So we'll start off with, this is my Ziploc baggie plastic. So usually what I do is I press it into the clay a little bit. You don't want to smush it. And the clay right now is pretty cool, but you still can, it's malleable. So you don't want to push it too hard, but you want to get it in all those wrinkles and stuff. So then I just start using my tool here and pushing the clay. I don't know, here, I'll zoom in a little bit. Hopefully we're not getting too much reflection off of the baggie. Now you can see here, I'm basically following the same, you know, rule of the X, where I'm creating the wrinkles along the bigger wrinkles, because that's how the flesh would sag. All right. So there's that. And we're going to pull that up. And there, you can see that that is actually some pretty nice wrinkle texture. Now, one thing that you're going to see that happens with the plastic baggies is that you get these sort of like vertical wrinkles, and that's from the bag wrinkling up as you're pulling your tool over it. Personally, it depends on what I'm doing, but in this case, to me, these wrinkles look a little bit too harsh, and I'd want them to be a little bit softer. So I can either, you know, lightly brush it with some alcohol, or in this case, you know, just a chip brush that's still got some remaining alcohol in it, and that softens it up a little bit. You can also use a chip brush that's not trimmed down and use a little bit of baby powder. Well, then I think, oh no, I obliterated some of the wrinkles. So you just go back in. Again, just smooth it down. And then start working it again. Now, I find with this technique that it helps if you sort of, like, you're actually pushing it. You want to create almost a lip around the wrinkle that you're making. I use this technique a lot in the Baba Yaga mask that I've been working on and posting videos of. But I want you to get a good view of what I'm doing here. And sometimes I like to just brush it just to kind of smooth it with my finger. That's getting more naturalistic. That would be a good wrinkle for, like, if you're older and like you have the skin on your neck, that's a great wrinkle for that. This is probably a little bit heavier than you would get normally. If you were to look like an actual real life wrinkle, they'd be finer than this, but this will read really well on a prosthetic or on a mask. Now I'm going to show you with some Saran wrap. This is just the kitchen grade Saran wrap. So this is really thin. So this is our first, here, one. That's our first one. And again, I'm just kind of smoothing it down there. And the reason I do this is because I want to make sure that I'm getting it in the wrinkle so that when I push down into the plastic, it's not dragging across. And again, I'm just moving my techniques. Now you can see here how the plastic is starting to pull a little bit, and that's because it's thinner. It's not as strong as the other plastic. So I'm getting these little pull lines, and you're going to see those when I pull up the plastic. And sometimes they're okay. It depends on, again, the effect that you're looking for. So there, you can kind of though see the little tiny wrinkles that were caused by the plastic wrinkling up. Now again, you can smooth that with a stipple brush if you want to. If you smooth it too much, and honestly, I prefer to go over it a few times because I think that once you smooth it down, you kind of get these wrinkles. You want layers of wrinkles, essentially. See, I'm getting a lot of pulling here, and sometimes it actually looks good. You sort of have to play it by ear, and again, always study your real life looks. See where you're going. So it did kind of turn out a little bit strange over here, but there you go. Here is the packing Saran wrap. This stuff's actually a really good thickness. I use this a lot. I find that the kitchen Saran wrap's a little too thin most of the time, but this stuff is just about perfect for me. That and the plastic baggie. Ooh, we are pulling a lot though. All right, so there we go. Now, this technique will give you these sort of softer wrinkles that'll look more naturalistic. Now, if I were just to use the tool by itself, you're gonna get these weird lips. And you can blend that down, and sometimes that is what you're looking for. But I find that this looks too harsh, and you get the little boogers on it too because you don't have the plastic holding it in place. So you really have to go back in and smooth it out. But I want you to see how, like, this wrinkle here, sorry, I keep bumping the camera here. This wrinkle right here is definitely not, or is more harsh than this wrinkle here. Again, it's going to come down a lot to personal taste. Now, some people, and I've done this too, you can also put baby powder down before you put down your plastic. And what that does is it makes it easier for the plastic to slide around. Some people like that better. I'm ambivalent. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. Let me go back to my Ziploc baggie, because that is my favorite one so far. And the reason is that this is just a little bit thicker. It's not pulling as much. And you can see, like, I'm going over the wrinkles too. I'm going over the wrinkles that I already, when I lay down a wrinkle, you can cross it. That's okay. Although keep in mind, again, the direction of the wrinkles, which means that the muscle underneath is going in this direction. I'm kind of just going to town here. And again, this would be really good for like neck wrinkles, like really aged skin that's like maybe been exposed to the sun too much. There we go. And again, sometimes I just like to burnish it a little bit with my finger. I'm going to show you another real quick technique. So I got these wrinkles here. They look a little bit harsher on the camera than they do in real life, but maybe I could work in a picture later. I'm going to hit it with a torch. This is just my little pen torch, which is running out of fuel, but so I got a lot of control right now. And what I'm doing is just kind of hovering it over it. I want you to see how it boldens up those wrinkles. It does melt some together, so you're probably going to have to work back into it. But it does get that nice texture. So there you go. And then I'm just going to freeze that with an upside down can of air. I'm not pressing down on the trigger all the way, because if you do, it's going to splatter and then it'll spray your clay, which sometimes is a good effect, but that's not what you're looking for right here. Now you can see here, because there's some moisture on the clay and I'm rubbing it with my finger and it's cold, I'm getting a real shine. So take that for what you will. So that can work for different things. But if you don't like the shine, then just either hit it with a Stipple sponge, and it'll knock that back, or you can hit it with like some alcohol. And I hope you see what I'm doing. I might be moving a little bit too fast. I'm kind of brushing the bristles like this so that they're catching a little bit. Great. I'm just gonna... I like to always have canned air around for this reason. You do not want to leave wet alcohol on your clay because if you hit it with a torch, it will go up in flames, and that's bad. All right, so that's wrinkle texture. Now let's do some pore texture. Okay, as you know from my previous lessons, the pores, depending on where they are in the skin, can create a lot of different textures. The pores that are like directly on the center of your nose usually tend to be very round in shape. And we'll start with those. For those pores, again, I'm going back to my Ziploc baggie. I'm going to use my pore tool, which is this guy here. And I don't know if you can see it from the side. These are just wires that have been rounded down, and they have little tiny points. So if I were to do it without the plastic, here, it makes a stamp like that. This is a smaller one. Oops, I pushed too hard. So there's that, and there's that. And again, if I were doing this without the plastic, I'd probably want to put down some baby powder just so that these don't stick so much. So this is, and I'm just doing this, and I'd like to, when I do this technique, I don't know if you can see this while I'm doing it, I'm doing this with my fingers. The reason I'm doing that is because if you go like this, it looks like a stamp. You can see that those are all in a row, right there. And you can see on the actual clay, it just looks like, you just did it in a row. Dot, 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 dot. So what I like to do is I like to pivot the tool as I'm tapping. You eventually get pretty fast at this. So there you go. There's a light texture. And I'm just kind of burnishing it with my finger again. It gives it a little bit of shine when I do that. This texture would be really good for, like I said, the tip of the nose, cheeks. This is a little bit exaggerated. So like this, you wouldn't want somebody who's like maybe a beautiful character to have this sort of texture because this would be too heavy for it. But it is good for pores. Now you could think about that like, okay, well here's some pores. Maybe the person has some acne scars. So you could like, and all I'm doing is using my W21 tool and just kind of carving out a little bit there. Carving out a little bit. Burnishing it. And then, where's that tool? There it is. I'm kind of trying to stay out of the center of them, but I'm sort of just working around it. There, you might see that then. And again, if you want to, you can hit this with a torch. It'll make it look more exaggerated and add in that shine. You don't have to use the upside down canvas spray for this. I'm just doing it to speed it up for the video. And here again, since it is moist from the can of air, you can also do this with just water. If I burnish it, you can see I'm putting a real shine on that. Okay, so like these would be really good for like the apples of the cheeks, the chin maybe, parts of the forehead. Yeah, like the tip of the nose, stuff like that. Now, as you move around the face, the pores tend to stretch depending on where they are. So like if you get around, so here's a nose. We'll just pretend this is a drawing. And here's the edge of the nose. So I don't know if you guys can tell what I'm doing here. Here's the nostril. So here would be little tiny dots. This texture would go right there, right there. Then as you get closer to this dip here, you're gonna want to have more pulled texture. Okay? So, let's see here. I'll do that over here. Again, going back to my plastic. And again, I'm using the plastic bag for most of this, but you can mix it up. You can do different kinds. Okay? So here I'm going to use my W21 tool. And because this thing has this nice shape here, right here, I can either go like that. It's going to create a small dot. So this would be like as it's getting closer to this part of the nose. Or if I want, I can turn it more to its side, and that's going to give me more of an elongated pore texture. And again, I'm pressing fairly hard. You don't want to press too hard, because if you press too hard, it's just going to go right through the plastic. But you'll start to get a feel for it, the resistance that it's going to give you. You can see I'm kind of mashing them together. That might also be good for like that wrinkled texture underneath your chin. Forehead would be great for this, where it's getting more of those pulled pores, where your skin is kind of like pulled like that. Okay, so like this would be more of those pulls. These would be good on cheeks, what have you. And again, we'll hit it with a torch. Get that shine. Hit it with a spray so it'll cool it down quickly. We'll burnish it so it's nice and shiny. Then we're going to work back into it. I almost always recommend working back into your textures. Don't just give it one pass and hope that that's going to be good enough. Give it a few. There is a such thing as over-texturing, which I've talked about before because I, again, did it on the Baba Yaga. And these textures here are a little bit exaggerated just for the video's sake. But it also might work for that character you're going for. So you can just see I'm working back into it. Okay, well this one, right now this is too manufactured, a little too harsh for me. So I'm going to start to pull those together. We're getting a texture similar to the one we did up here, but it's much more dense. And again, just study life. Study what you're looking at. Study your references. Get lots of pictures of the skin that you're trying to replicate. And keep in mind that skin changes drastically depending on the character's background. If the person is old, it's obviously going to be more wrinkled. If they spent a lot of time out in the sun, it's going to be wrinkled and like thin. If they're, you know, say like sunburned, you might have a little bit of peeled texture in there. We'll get to that in a minute. It's going to be different depending on who the character is and make it work for what that character is. Again, I don't think this would be good for a beauty character because it's just a little too harsh. So there we are. Getting some really, what I'm seeing here is this needs more right here. I don't know if you guys can see this. This part here is too obviously the texture of this tool. But in here, we're starting to get some real nice forms. And it's just a matter of doing that over and over again. That's why texturing takes forever. Now, another way you can do the pulled pore texture is by taking your pore tool and just pulling it. And again, when I do this, I like to twist it as I'm working, just because it mixes it up a little bit. I find that this particular tool tends to make a more subtle texture than this tool. And it's just because this wire is thinner and it can push in harder. But you can see here that it's still creating a pulled pore texture. Wanted to show you the quilting tool. This is a technique I picked up, I believe, from Kevin Yeager. So again, you can find these at any craft store. You have to look in like the accessories aisle of the sewing section to find it. I just happen to have one because I used to sew. And I'm holding this at like a, not a 90-degree angle. I'm holding a little bit of like a 35-degree angle maybe. Oops. And there we go. You gotta be careful. Maybe a little bit more like a 45. What I don't like about this is I think it tends to read as that manufactured texture. So you can't use this by itself. But this is really good for making that pulled pour texture. Now, if you wanted to, you can also do it. Here, I'm going to erase my nose picture. Go a little further up here. You can also do it without the plastic bag. You're going to get similar effects. Now, you can see it makes little tiny triangles. But again, we're not going to just leave it like this. Think about the power of the X, you know, kind of make X marks when you're doing this. This one's good for laying in texture quickly. Okay, so here's with the plastic bag right here, and here's with it just raw. We're gonna take this. This is the, again, the Ziploc baggie. I'm gonna take my 21 tool and just start working back into that. So it's great. It makes like a starter texture. And then I can be a little bit lazier with my tool. Also, your arm is going to burn after doing this. Just this movement, it does get tiring. You can see I'm working back into it. It kind of gave me a good, it shows me where I want those, the lines of the pores to go. So it gives me some directionality to start with. It's like a good way to map out the textures on your sculpt. So we're getting some nice textures there. And again, I didn't really do that one enough, but here. Also, I don't know if you noticed this, like when I'm doing this with the plastic bag, I tend to avoid the wrinkles that are already there because I don't want to risk anything that's going to give me a straight line. Since you're trying to create naturalistic skin textures, you don't want anything that's going to look machined. Cool. All right. Now we're going to get to what I think is the most fun technique. So we're going to switch over to this corner here. This is one where you really want to have the Saran wrap because it's going to work a lot better. So I'm getting out my big torch, my benzomatic propane torch. And I am... heat this up. Okay, you do not want your clay to get burnt. That's important. Okay, so here's my Saran wrap. This is the kitchen Saran wrap. I'm gonna lay it on here, and then I'm gonna just kind of smoosh it. I love this technique. I think I picked this one up from John Wrightson, who is an amazing sculptor. He worked at Immortal Masks a little bit when I was there. He is brilliant. Works on Walking Dead. Has a very adorable dog. Okay, so we're getting some nice wrinkles there. And I kind of like how that looks. I'm going to hit it with my canned air. You have to use the canned air on this one. And all you're doing is when you use the canned air upside down, you're just spraying out the coolant, which is really cold. You're essentially freezing the clay in place. Now you're just going to carefully peel it off. It's not going to necessarily come off clean. There we go. So we got some sweet, sweet wrinkles there. But, you know, there's going to be some bubbles and stuff like that. So you can either work back into it with your tool, soften that up, follow those wrinkle textures. Or you can even just take your plastic, and it's still a little frozen. This is, again, the kitchen plastic. I'm just going to do that, follow those wrinkles that I made with there, and then just kind of push it in. Again, this is a very, very specific kind of wrinkle. I'm not even sure I would use this on a realistic character, but it is a lot of fun. One of my favorite techniques, for sure. Only thing is, if you're going to be molding this, you got to be careful that you don't have burrows where like the mold can sneak in under the clay. So sometimes you get these, like I showed you earlier, there was like a bubble. If it gets in underneath the bubble, when you demold it, it's going to rip it out and it's going to be messy. So don't do that. Be cognizant of, you know, that you don't have any tunnels, essentially. I'm just kind of just picking out wrinkles, and then I can use my baby powder and brush to kind of pick out the boogers. If it's really delicate, you can freeze it again. That way you're less likely to damage the clay when you brush it. There we go. That's a fun one. I like that. Finally, we're going to do one more technique that's in the vein of this. And I sculpted out a really rudimentary finger bone. We're going to do something that works good with zombies. It's a combination of techniques. The first thing you need to do, though, is you need to get a pasta maker. Now, this is one that Sculpting makes. And I'm sorry, my camera's so close, you can't really see it. I'll post a link to it in the description here. But it's basically... Sorry, I got some paper towel in there. 2 cylinders that as you turn a crank, it does that. So, and there's different thicknesses. So right now I have it set on, here's the dial. It is on 1. All right, and you can see how the depth of that. So I am going to use my thicker plastic. This is the plastic bag plastic that I got. It's about the same thickness as a Ziploc baggie. And I'm going to take some warm clay. You don't want it to be like melty hot, but you want it to be pretty warm. Hang on, it's a little too hot. Let me just massage it down here. So I have a crock pot going right now on the side. I try to always have one going when I'm sculpting, just so I can pull out warm clay when I need to. You don't have to use this pasta maker tool. I just find that it's probably easier. So I'm just taking my clay. Sorry, I bumped the camera. This is about the size, I don't know, 50-cent piece maybe. And I just sort of squished it down so it's flat. Okay. I'm going to take this and I'm going to run it through the pasta maker. Actually, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put it in here, fold the plastic over it. So I have a little bit of give on both sides. And I'm going to run it through so I have that bit of give. I don't know if it'll work. We'll see. This is at the number 1 setting. So it should go through pretty easily. It's fire. I'm going to crank it up to, oh, I don't know, 3. Run it through again. Let's go up to 5. I don't usually go higher than 5. You can see it's just squishing it. And again, work it down. You could start at 5, but it's going to be an exercise in frustration. Yeah, I could probably go a little bit. Let's try 7. I'm trying to get a thin piece here. Ooh, that's thin. Okay, it's fighting me a little bit. Ooh, there we go. Okay, there is our clay. Okay. So this is very thin. This is one where you need to do a lot of retroactive work to make sure that you don't have tunnels. Okay, so going back to our sculpting board, here's our finger bone. What I do is I take this clay and I just tear it. I'm tearing it with my hands. I wanted to get like a naturalistic tear. And again, just think about how skin would work. I'm getting some edge there. This is like a multi-level technique here. So I don't know if you can see here, I got a lot of edge coming up. I'm actually gonna tear that back a little bit more. I'm just sort of smooshing this side into the clay so that it doesn't lift up. And there, I don't know if you can see this, a happy accident sort of happened where I tore a hole. I like it when that happens. Sometimes I'll try to do it on purpose. It's kind of like I said, it's a happy accident. You might just have to like layer. I'm going to do a couple different techniques. So we got our finger technique here. I'm going to just layer some pieces that are, you know, scrap pieces. We'll see what happens. A lot of times I think that it's really good to experiment. Okay, so let's start with our finger. I'm going to use my pen torch because I want more control. If I use my blowtorch, it's just going to blast it. I'm going to start hitting this. Now you can see that the clay sort of retracts when the heat hits it. I'm going to get in there and get all around this finger bone. And then I'm going to get my plastic wrap again. And I'm wrinkling the plastic wrap right here and pressing it in. And you gotta work quickly because this stuff's cooling. So this is the thicker plastic wrap that I'm working on right now. This is the thinner stuff. And again, just gonna see what happens here. Okay, that's a light texture. That's maybe not as, you know, obvious as I wanted it. So I work back into it. I'm gonna do one side at a time right now. Wait, this looks a little vulgar. Sorry about that. It's a finger, I swear. Actually, let me do it this way so you can see the texture better. And if I want to, I can just like, work with the clay. Make it your friend. I'm just kind of melting some and I'm just... You can tear it up. See if it will leave parts behind. Okay. So, my pen torch is so close to running out of fuel. Alright. So again, I'm just gonna wrinkle it up and I'm gonna press it in. We'll see what happens. Now it's getting a little gnarly. And you can see here that it is, oops, sorry, starting to create texture around that finger bone, which is kind of nice. Now this technique, I wouldn't recommend that you do it just and leave it straight up the way it was. I would work back into it. So again, like, you might want to lift it up a little bit so that you get like a nice edge. You might want to layer more clay onto it. Let's go over to this section here. So I got these. Let's see what happens. I'm going to hit this with the big blowtorch. didn't start a fire. Good job. All right, this is my thicker plastic wrap. I'm just laying it in and we're gonna see what happens. A lot of this is just experimental. You do it till you like how it looks. I'm not gonna claim to have the secrets to anything, but for everything, I should say. I'm gonna try to rip it off like a band-aid, see what happens. Okay, so I ripped off some of these sections here. That's kind of cool. Let's work with that. So I'm taking my tool and I'm just gonna carve it out. You know, make some holes. Think about those wrinkles. Like this would be, again, I think that this is a really, I'm sorry, I keep on saying again. This is a really good technique for like zombie skin or something that's decaying. Think about how it looks. You know, you can get in there and get deep. You can start adding in like, you know, sometimes you get these like little boogers all over on, at least I do. Get all these little boogers around your station from where you're doing that. Just roll them up. Put them in the sculpture. That's a nice meaty look. Okay, well I got that. And I could take like a little bit of my torn clay right there. Make that like a skin flap that's hanging over it. And then I could hit it with the torch again, my almost out torch. And what the torch also does, it makes it shiny. I don't know if you see the clay shrinking back. Gives it some nice looks there. Oops, I got a bristle from one of my chip brushes in there. So it's widening up those holes. Oops. So that's just, it's a really interesting texture. I would argue that you should probably use this sparingly because you don't want it to look too obvious, and you do want to, like I said, work back into it. You don't want to just leave it as is. So like you might even like layer textures again. So here I got this wrinkly, like decayed looking skin. Well, I want it to look more like skin. So I'm gonna take, you know, my W21 and add some pores. I'm kind of going a little sparingly. I'm not tapping as heavily as I did over, well, I guess it was right here. There we go. Yeah, it needs more, you know. And again, it's just it's about pulling out that texture and making it look good. So you know when it's not enough. I think that you can look at it and go, oh, it doesn't quite look real. There we go. So we're starting to get some texture there. You know, maybe I can make another wound or something. An experiment. So there you have it. You know, this is a very erratic technique that requires some finessing. It's gonna look different no matter how, like whatever you do. It's gonna change how it looks. I find it's really good to, going back to this example here. So like if I finish this would not be finished in my book, by the way. You know, I might go clean it up a little bit more. I'm gonna want contrasting textures because that's gonna help it read better. If this is really a finger that's bursting out of the skin, you know, that the bone's exposed. First of all, I want to get this edge so it's catching the light. Great. Next, I want this, it needs to be hard. I want this to look shiny. You know, I want this part to be looking like polished bone. Oops. Might have gotten a little too aggressive with it. This is just water that I had, it's actually condensation on a glass that I'm drinking out of. You don't need a lot. It's going to start to pull out that texture. And then I would probably actually add more, because right now I'm starting to lose it a little bit. It's starting to look a little bit manufactured. So I would run more clay through the thing. And also, this is a piece of clay I rolled out earlier. You can see it's a lot stiffer because it's cool. It got this really nice wrinkle texture on it that just happened because it got smushed in the roller. I might just try to use that. Like, oh, yeah, that looks like torn skin right there. Again, it's a finger bone. Probably should have planned this out a little better. Apologies. And I can hit it with my torch. Oops. Again, be very careful about your torch. You don't want to start any fires. I have started fires in the past. I always recommend, just as a safety tip, keep a fire extinguisher nearby just in case. You never know when something's gonna get out of control. Ah, see, like this is, I would say it's a happy accident. It wasn't cool enough when I pulled it up. Sorry, we're getting a little off camera here. So like, it's still squishy. Oh, that didn't work. See, I did burn it a little bit right here. I don't know if you can tell. I'm kind of just pushing it and making wrinkles like that. Okay, well, you know. And again, I liked playing with it. Play with it. This is how you discover new techniques. Like right there. Okay, this is a cool texture. Okay, forget about my finger. This is, again, I would say this is a happy accident. Where I'm getting this cool texture right here. It looks like the wrinkle texture that we did up here. But it's got these globs over it where it's not. You know, so I would pick that out. And it's just about spotting those accidents and accenting them. That kind of looks really cool there. It looks like pits and valleys, or like a burn almost. And actually, I should say, this technique that I've been doing here is great for burns. Because if you, let's see if I can, going back to this guy here. Okay, you can see I burned my clay a little bit. I had my torch too hot. I'm just gonna do that again. And this time I didn't make the smooth wrinkles. Like they're all kind of clustered together. You can also just throw your board in a freezer if you need to. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this doesn't look like a burn just yet, but if I start to like smooth down parts of it, like I want this big piece in the center to be. Now, if you're doing a character that's like specifically burned, like I'm thinking Freddy Krueger in this instance, you're going to need to follow it to, you know, follow his actual sculpture to get the burns right. But if you're doing like a burn makeup, and when I say burn, I'm thinking this is more like a healed burn, where you're getting that burned scar tissue. So I'm just burnishing the clay, whoops, with my thumb. And you can see that that's starting to look a lot like burned scar tissue. Let's get rid of that. I am applying some pressure. You know, maybe I want to go in with my alcohol, my chip brush, kind of smooth. I don't want those hard edges like I have. Okay, so that's starting to look more like a. I'm gonna pick out some of these textures here. It's always about working back into it. I don't think you ever want to just leave something purely like with the plastic wrap, because you will see the difference it makes. Or you'll look at it later as an artist and be like, oh, that's plastic wrap. Okay, so then using some water. Careful you don't hit your skin with the cold stuff, because it does kind of burn. I have no feeling in my fingers anymore, so, you know, it all works out for me, but... Ah, there we go. Now that is looking like healed burn scar tissue. And again, that was just plastic bag, poking it, and then buffing it. Anyway, I appreciate you following along through my trials and tribulations of working with plastic in your sculptures, and I hope that you can use some of these techniques. If you have any questions, please mention them in the Patreon post, because I will do my best to answer them, and I hope that you guys get something out of this. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Bye all.